So, hello and welcome to this edition of Softcover by ThePrint, where we do the digital release of a new book. And this time around, we're doing the digital release of a fascinating book that goes into the emerging unicorns that we have in India. A unicorn, of course, is a startup that has a valuation of more than $1 billion. And India has several now. Many have come up over the last few years. And we have this book by Kushal Lodha and Ishan Sharma, which is called Unlocking Unicorn Secrets Behind the Scenes of India's Billion-Dollar Startups. And I can't tell you how timely a book it is, because this seems to be India's startup moment, where a lot of companies are kind of, gathering up steam to really explode into proper significant size, whether in India, whether they also take their markets abroad, that's to be seen. But at least as far as India is concerned, there's several companies that are making it big. And lucky for us, we have the authors with us to talk to us about the book, to talk about the startup industry, and to talk about unicorns in general and what makes them unicorns. So thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting us, Sharad.
No, of course.
Thank you so much, Sharad, for having us.
You're most welcome. And so now I'm going to leave it up to you to decide who's going to answer which question. But first, I wanted to have your own histories, because both of you have started your own companies. And for those who are interested, Kushal has started KAGR, which is an edtech platform for finance upskilling, which is very dear to my own heart. And Ishan is a co-founder of MarketUp, which is a content agency. So now the fact that both of you have started your own companies, is that what led you to this book, or was it something else?
Kushal, you can go ahead first.
Sure. So basically, that's right. Like we started this book when we thought that we were going to take a plunge in entrepreneurship. Ishan already had started working on his agency, and I was about to leave my full-time job. And we thought that before starting something, it's always good to learn from the stalwarts who have already made it big in their lives. And that was one of the main reasons of writing this book. And we thought that there is no book as of now in India which talks about the unicorn startups and their journeys. What kind of challenges did they face? How did they hire the first few set of customers? How did they go about finding the product market fit, etc.? So we thought that let's interview 20 to 25 unicorn founders, and then let's try to ensure that people are getting to know a lot of things if they are going to start up something of their own ultimately. So that was the idea, and it really helped us. If you ask me today, right, like both of us, it really helps us today as well in our own businesses. Whenever we try to take any decision, we like try to just reiterate what kind of learnings we were given, what kind of advice we were given by all these founders, and we try to implement it in our own businesses as well.
Right. Fantastic. And Ishan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I know. So it was February of 2022 when I visited Kushal, who's in Mumbai right now. So I visited him, and you were like, it would be wonderful to meet and network with people who are building huge companies in India, right? We are both like networking junkies, so we like to meet new people, understand their journeys, and just vibe with that. Right. So that was the thing. We were like, how can we approach these people? And one good way of doing that was to start a conversation with them, to record that thing and turn it into maybe a podcast or a book. Then we did a survey with our audience, trying to understand what would they be more interested in. Would it be a podcast? Would it be a YouTube video series? Or do they want like a dedicated book in which we instill all of the learnings that we've had? And it turns out that people really want a book which has like all the list of the people that we met and what did we learn from them and what were their initial years like. And that's how we went ahead with it. June of last year is when we started recording, and here we are today with the book.
Fantastic. And congratulations on an actual, very engaging book to both of you. It was a pleasure to read. But immediately when I saw it, the first question to me was, why did you pick these 20 startups to talk to? India, as we know, has about 100 or more startups. So why these 20?
So again, the goal was to meet as many founders as possible. In fact, we have sent over 400 odd cold emails to the PR heads, to the founders themselves. And it was a huge experiment that we were doing, right? So we were not sure how many of them would turn out. 20 to 25 is also a good number for making a book that is consumable by most people. If we go and try to have all of them, then it will become a huge book.
Okay.
And also we were just not able to, document all of their journeys in a time of 1 year, right? So from June to June this year itself. So all we were able to get to was 20 to 25. It was a very hard process, right? Like behind the scenes of writing this book, it involved cold emailing, following up with the PR heads, finding a time slot, and then also making sure that we have free time in that time, making all the bookings, going to their offices, meeting them in person. Some of them had offices in Gurgaon, some of them were in Bangalore, some of them were in Mumbai, one was in Pune as well. So we had this huge process that we had to go through. But at the end, we were able to get hold of 20 founders and we can cover their story from each sector.
So if you see, like just to add on to what Ishan said, right? So it's a very sector-oriented book in the sense that we try to analyze like how many sectors are there in the startup space. You talk about fintech, edtech, consumer tech, health tech, etc. So what we tried to do was that we tried to cover at least two startups in each sector. For example, when we let's say we listed down, so B2B was one of the sectors. So we thought that Off Business and Oxizo, which are the leading unicorns, let's try to reach out to them. Then we just mentioned D2C as another sector. So Mamaearth is like one of the most popular startups in the D2C ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Although we tried to reach out to other founders as well, but like whenever we got any conversion, so we thought that at least two startups should be there in each industry. For example, in edtech industry, we reached out to multiple of them. We got Eruditus and Vedantu, which are in the edtech space. Then crypto was a buzzword, and crypto was like going. It was the talk of the town. You also know in 2022 and all.
Yeah.
So we interviewed CoinDCX as well. So the point of stating this is that we tried to analyze each and every sector. We thought that let's interview at least two or three startups from every sector so that people will also get diversity in the sense that they just don't want to read about fintech, edtech, consumer tech, health tech. They want to read about each and everything. So in fintech, we have Zerodha, Razorpay. In edtech, I mentioned we have Eruditus, Vedantu. In B2B, we have Dealshare and we have Oxizo and Off Business. And in D2C, we have something like a Mamaearth, etc. In healthcare, we have Pristine Care. So like people will get to know a lot about these industries and they'll also get to know about a B2B versus a B2C business as well. So that was the idea.
Right. And I mean, I know a little bit of what Ishan was talking about, because even as a journalist, if we go and try to interview these companies and you try to meet their founders, the amount of coordination required is staggering. And that is for just a news story or a short video that we do. For research for a book, I can only imagine how much time it must have taken. So, I mean, kudos to the two of you for putting that work in. It shows in the book, it comes out. And so now you've spoken to a bunch of founders and people working in the startup space. And my question then is that are most of these these unicorns, have they become unicorns because they are disruptors in terms of the very core idea that they bring? Or are they disruptors in terms of the execution of an already existing idea? Which is the more common thing that you have seen in general?
Kushal, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So, right, I think one of the common themes which we saw was the execution part. I'll give you certain examples as well, right? Now, let's say we were trying to interview the founders of Car Deco, right? And Car Deco is a company, Car Deco is a very big group, and they started off with Girnar Soft, which is the name of the company. And they started off with a software company, and then they pivoted to a model which is there today where they are selling the second-hand cars, etc. So, what we realized was that although they had seen a certain similar model in an auto expo in the US, they wanted to execute it first in India, and they were like the first executioners in order to ensure that that model is established in India as well. So that was one where we thought that even if the idea is replicable or even if the idea is not new, these founders have really executed it very, very well. You talk about Zerodha, it's into the fintech industry now. It started off in 2010. And if you see, it was just working on its roots from 2010 to 2017 or maybe even 18 or 19. But during COVID is when they got a very big boom, when their customers increased significantly from, let's say, 2 million to 10 million and 11 million, which is the customer base today. The point of stating this is that there are a lot of discount broking companies like, let's say, the traditional ones like ICICI, Kotak, HDFC, and a bunch of them. But Zerodha had something disruptive in the sense that their tech was extremely lucrative and it was very user friendly. But discount broking as a concept was always there in the existence. So again, the idea was there, but the disruption was in the tech front. So all in all, what I'm trying to
Right.
say is that execution is the key, number one. Number two is that the idea can be same, but how you disrupt in some feature or in some way of differentiation strategy, that is something which will help you in order to succeed. Now there are also founders like Ashwin Damera, who's the founder of Eruditus. Now, if you
Yeah.
talk about that in India, like competition of Eruditus is not there on, like it's the first company which started off in the online education space, in the higher education, in the executive education.
Right.
What they do is primarily they try to sell courses. They partner with universities like Harvard, Columbia, Stanford, Wharton, and sell those courses to middle level and higher level management. And this happens
Correct.
online. And now, like first they used to do offline through Eruditus, and they started Emeritus in 2015, which is an online arm. So there was no one who was doing something like this, and they had an advantage of cracking partnerships with schools like INSEAD, Harvard, because INSEAD and Harvard were their own like alma mater. Like Ashwin was
Right.
Harvard alumni, and Chaitanya, who's the other co-founder, is alumni of INSEAD. So
Mm.
that was the advantage they had. Again, here, like although the idea is not very unique in the sense that executive education is something which is happening since 90s or maybe even before that, but all they did was they had that execution part in the sense that they were able to convince schools like INSEAD and schools like Harvard in order to partner with them, and that was the turning point for them.
And they
And
were also first movers in India, so
correct,
they had the first mover advantage
correct.
there.
Exactly. And last point about fractal analytics. So this is a company where I know the founder quite closely, Shrikant. He mentioned us, like you'll find it in the book as well. He mentioned that their first client, they had to do it free of cost because they were
Correct.
providing a service where they wanted to ensure that the quality is top notch. And even if they are not earning any single rupee, they would be fine with it as far as they are getting referrals. Their
Yeah.
first client was ICICI Bank, and we were surprised to know that they did not even charge a single rupee. ICICI Bank was like building some mental models or some like language models which which Fractal had the expertise in. And
Right.
Shrikant just told that okay, if we'll build the model for you free of cost, you just help us with referrals. And that's how they were able to crack the second customer, which was HDFC Bank, etc., through referrals which was given by ICICI Bank. So again, the point of stating this is that the execution is something which is the key, and what do you call, like jugaad is something which which needs to be there in the founder in order to succeed ultimately. So
Of course.
jugaad, like it's also there in the Oxford Dictionary nowadays. The meaning of which is that flexible approach to innovation. So how
Yes.
do you, let's say, just take your way out, and how do you ensure that you are innovating and you are disrupting each and every single time? And even if it's an idea which is replicable, disruption in the part of differentiation in one part can also make you like successful as a founder.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And it's interesting that you also mentioned that, this aspect of revenue generation, that in the beginning, don't think about the money, first look at referrals. But now these companies are unicorns because of their billion-dollar valuations. But valuation is different from value creation, which is different from profits. And a lot of these companies are not in profit right now, even though they have a valuation of more than $1 billion. So, do you see in your conversations with these founders, do you see that as being a matter of concern, or are they okay with it for now?
I think that in our experience, whenever we used to meet all the founders, like take example of Grow or take example of any other founder that we were interviewing, right? So Lalit Keshre, and they were talking about how, especially after the 2021, 2022 era, they have their focus shifted towards how can they generate the most profit by reducing their expenses. Obviously, that includes some of layoffs as well, and then focus all their energy into getting into that business mentality instead of being in the startup mentality of burning cash for growth. In fact, that was our biggest question as well that we used to ask them after the funding question, that how would you manage between growing the startup and also having the profitability in the startup.
Right.
And especially at the stage at they were after reaching $1 billion, they were all focusing on how can they reduce their expenses and focus back on their profitability. So I think that was the main theme of their thought process at that point.
Okay. And Kushal, you have anything to add?
Yeah, Yeah, sure. So I'll tell you certain examples right now. That's an interesting question to ask before, because like even I come from a venture capital background, so I know like what are the valuations, and I've worked in a venture capital industry for like 1 year of my life. So
Right.
whenever I used to go there and ask like the questions about valuations and profitability to these founders, I realized one thing, that although like the valuations were on the boom because of like 2021, because there was like a big push of the VC ecosystem and big flow of money and liquidity in the Indian ecosystem and Indian
Absolutely.
startup market.
Yeah.
And that was like one of the reasons of this startup boom, which was there, the tech boom because of COVID, which was there. If any company is using tech, they are definitely going to get a lot of valuation because of COVID pandemic that was hit. But what I realized ultimately was that of although like a lot of startups were becoming unicorn, but they were not profitable, but I could see the founders had something in their mind that would show a path to profitability. So for
I
example,
see.
now like let's say you talk about founders like Zerodha, when we met Nitin, right? So that is a company which is profitable, and that's like an insane business in the sense that 50% profit margins, and at that scale, at that revenue, generating that kind of profitability is just very high. And
Yeah.
that is like an inspiration for every other startup founder as well. When we used to ask them about how do you manage to go towards profitability and this valuation bubble which is there, do you think it is going to go down? All the founders used to mention that there are some cost cutting measures that they are taking right now in order to go towards profitability. And there were founders who had the guilt of laying off employees as well. Like in fact, I'll tell you a funny incident. When we had gone to interview 2 3 companies, right, just before 1 week there was a news in the channel, like there was a news on like a lot of articles that this company has laid off 100 employees, this company
Okay.
has laid off 200 employees. And we were like, should we ask this question, because this is a sensitive topic. But then I told Ishan ki, let's try to ask and let's just see what are the views and thoughts of these founders. And we were surprised that almost three of the founders who had laid off like 100 or 200 employees just 1 or 2 weeks back, they were feeling firstly very guilty about the fact that okay, that was a cost cutting measure. But if you see the long picture, they always wanted to become profitable, and there were some decisions which they took wrong, in the sense that over hiring or maybe overpaying the
Yeah.
people who are there in the company, etc. So they wanted to rectify those decisions. So I think that again, valuation was a bubble in 2021, 2022, but now it has corrected. If you see statistics we have in 2023, there is only one unicorn, which is Zepto, in the last 8 months. That also became a unicorn last week itself.
Last
There is
week.
no single
Correct.
unicorn in 2023. Yeah. And in 2022, I don't know the exact number of unicorns, but there was like a bunch of unicorns. Almost every week, we used to see this company has become a unicorn, this company has become a unicorn, etc. So again, people have realized that profitability is the key. You cannot just keep on burning on performance marketing or influencer marketing to acquire customers. You have to have a path to profitability. And now VCs have also started realizing they are only going to fund those companies that have a clear cut path to profitability. So I think that's why this is this year, especially after the valuation bubble which was there last year.
Right, absolutely. And so now you actually touch upon the topic of my last question, which has to do with the unicorns that are no longer unicorns. We saw a bunch of companies that became unicorns, but then that number also, several of them started falling by the wayside. One famous example is Byju's, which is in a related sector to where you work as well, Kushal. But so my question then is that what were some of the common issues that these founders that you spoke to, what were the issues that they mentioned most often as being an impediment to growth and an impediment to sustain themselves at this size?
I think it was definitely the so we did not really talk about the numbers from them, right? We were focusing more towards the journey that they had, the early
Right.
years that they had. But talking about, as you said, right, what limited their growth and all, it was definitely the acquisition numbers, like CAC of every single customer that they were trying to acquire.
Okay.
That was on the higher end. And of course, for example, Unacademy, right? Of course, Unacademy has finally become profitable. We did not cover them, but they have taken back their expenses that they used to spend on influencer marketing or other expenses, and they've focused primarily on their test prep business. So things like that. I think their CAC has reduced substantially. I think Zepto had negative EBITDA margins, which have now gotten and become a lot better. So I think it's a lot of that. Their CAC becoming lesser.
Okay, so fantastic. So now thank you all for watching this. And please do look out for this wonderful book in your bookshops, also online, wherever you buy books, you'll find this book. Please do read it. And thank you both to the authors for joining us for this very, very engaging discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sharon.
Thank you very much.
All right.